Hello, welcome to another episode of This, That, and the Other. Today I'm going to be discussing a product that existed over 100 years ago, Dr. Swett's root beer. I first heard about it when I was at an antique show in Tyson's Corner Mall. Somebody was selling a sign, an old sign, Dr. Swett's root beer, and I was curious about it, ended up buying it. I'm going to go ahead and show you the sign. It's lit up and it says ice cold Dr. Swett's root beer. Got the logo of the man to boy. It's supposed to say, they're saying basically it can be enjoyed from childhood to middle age. Ice cold, says ice cold, and here's the whole sign, bottom. And this is glass right here, and it has two clips. The other one's not even hooked onto there, so this thing doesn't have much support, so I have to be careful holding this thing. And let me go ahead and get that back up here before it falls over. And I have a 1989 Boston Red Sox program when I saw the Red Sox take on the Yankees in Fenway Park. And there's a picture of where the Red Sox originally played baseball prior to Fenway Park. It was Huntington Avenue grounds, which I actually did in one of my shows about this. And in this picture, it has an advertisement. This picture that's Huntington Avenue grounds. It has an advertisement for Dr. Swett's root beer right in this corner. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my notes and go ahead and discuss excerpts of this person's article. It's a very long article on the internet. Dr. Swett's root beer was originated by Dr. George W. Swett, 1834 to 1924. That's when he was born 1834, died 1924. He owned two large wholesale and retail pharmacies in the 1800s, one in Boston, the other one in New York City. His root beer was first sold in little packets of dry ingredients as a fountain drink in his pharmacies. It was then shipped to other pharmacies as a syrup to be mixed with soda water. It later was pre-mixed and sold in bottles. Not fermented and contained no alcohol. In the late 1800s, Dr. Swett's root beer was available throughout the United States and produced by franchise bottling companies until the 1950s. He was born October 1834 in St. Stephen, Charlotte County, New Brunswick, Canada, the son of Nathaniel Swett and Amelia L. Hall. Many examples of company advertising state that Dr. Swett's root beer was established in 1845 when he was 11 years old. Although this claim's not proven, it seems likely that he was experimenting with various concoctions when he was a boy and perhaps even selling something like root beer. Death Notice states that he graduated from New York University in 1858, but that has not been proven. So I'm going to go ahead and scroll over to 1888, and here's a picture of one of his buildings right here. Let's see. Actually, 1876, Hires Root Beer made its debut at the U.S. Centennial Exposition in Philadelphia, along with along with Alexander Graham Bell's telephone, the Remington typewriter, and Heinz ketchup. At that time, Charles Elmer Heinz, 1851 to 1937, was a young pharmacist in Philadelphia. There are several legends about how he discovered or invented his formula. Hires herb tea as early as 1866 when he was 15 years old. All these legends are questionable, but he did obtain a patent for Hires root beer during or prior to 1876. Get over to 1888, Dr. Swett's root beer was advertised by trading cards showing men and women tennis players in rather comic poses. This man has three different ones, and he's heard there's been as many as 6. On the front of each card, in the lower left corners, in very small print, is a notice, copyright by the Bufford Sons Lithographic Company. And here's a picture of the postcards. Two more. I'm not sure how these are coming out the way, because I have this in selfie mode, so it's kind of difficult, but I'm trying to show you what these things look like. All right, getting over to 1888, or I did get 1888, going over to 1890, the Boston Directory has George W. Swett, Drugs and Medicines, an address in Boston and an address in New York. The liquid concentrate syrup was mixed with soda water at drugstores and soda fountains. The stoneware syrup dispenser would be readily available behind the counter. and can probably be dated to 1890. So that's the thing right here. Waitresses brought the root beer to customers seated at tables. This Dr. Swett's root beer pottery mug was found in Rockville, Connecticut dump. It was found in a dump that closed in 1910. It was found under 10 feet of debris. It was auctioned on eBay. Although it cannot be positively dated, it's no long later than 1910. It was probably made about 1890. And this picture right here of that mug. In 1892, William Painter, a Baltimore machine shop operator, was awarded a patent on the crown cork bottle seal, an invention that quickly became a standard for the industry and replaced over 1,000 different types of bottle sealing devices in use at that time. The ready-to-drink version of Dr. Swett's root beer was sold in earthenware, also called stoneware or ceramic bottles, probably before 1892. Precise dating of these bottles is difficult. Bristol-style glaze bottles were developed by the Powell family in Bristol, England in 1835. The texture of the ware was coarsely to moderately coarse. The ware was characterized by a buff-colored fabric and a clear, glossy glaze. The upper part of the vessel was dipped in iron oxide glaze, producing a caramel color. And get a picture here of that bottle right here. Bristol-style bottles were widely used until the late 1870s. Thereafter, they were gradually replaced by glass bottles, but they were still being used in England in the 1920s. The label on Dr. Swett's earthenware bottles is simply black lines and lettering, an oval within an oval, with the words Dr. Swett's Original Root Beer, registered Boston, Massachusetts, contents 8 fluid ounces. The ready-to-drink version of Hires root beer was sold in bottles in 1893. Now going over to 1919. Here's a picture of an advertisement for Dr. Swett's root beer from childhood to age. Childhood to old age, I mean. And let's see here. Get over to 1919. That's a picture right here of Dr. Swett. A&W Root Beer began in June 8, 1919 in California. Dr. Swett's root beer was sold by the Tri-State Beverage Company, El Paso, Texas, in business from 1919 to 1923. The bottles are quite unusual in that they are the only ceramic bottles known to have carried the name of an El Paso firm. Ceramic bottles were much more common in the 1830s to 1880 period, although they were still in use in England in the 1920s. The bottle was marked with a rubber ink pad stamp before it was glazed. The glaze became transparent after firing, allowing the mark to be easily visible. Identical to Dr. Swett's earthenware bottles sold elsewhere, except there was also a label on the back, a triangle within a triangle, with the words bottled by Tri-State Beverage Company, El Paso, Texas. Even though root beer was sold in bottles, draft root beer continued to be popular at drugstores and soda fountains. 1920, the Prohibition. The 18th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States, passed in 1919, prohibited the manufacture, import, export, and sale of alcoholic beverages. One of the results was a huge upsurge in demand for non-alcoholic beverages such as root beer. Another result was that many breweries bought franchises to produce non-alcoholic beverages. The Dr. Swett Root Beer Company of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, placed a full-page ad in the Philadelphia Record, 17th of June, 1920. It shows a clear glass bottle with a bottle cap and paper label. This is the earliest example of Dr. Swett's root beer sold in glass bottles. Apparently, paper labels have not survived on bottles, although some labels have survived because they were never used, auctioned on eBay. And here's a picture of one of the paper labels right here. It's difficult to do this without turning the camera off. I've turned the camera off a couple of times and had to reshoot. He died March 12, 1924 in Malden, Middlesex, Massachusetts. Let's see, moving over to 1937. Let's see here. Dad's old-fashioned root beer began about 1937 in Chicago, perhaps as early as 1933. George R. Dunham and his associates sold the Dr. Swett Root Beer Company to a group of four stockholders, including Nelson Rockefeller. The new owners retained the Boston facilities as Dr. Swett Root Beer Company of Boston, but incorporated, but moved the headquarters to New York City. Franchises for Dr. Swett's Root Beer were advertised in the first annual Blue Book of the National Carbonators and Bottlers Association, February 1939. The book contained detailed information on what was available on the bottlers to the bottlers of soft drinks. 1940, advertised in the second annual Blue Book of the National Carbonators and Bottlers Association, February 1940, note the change of address from Boston to Rockefeller Plaza. Nelson Rockefeller was the main shareholder in the company. And this is where the new logo, I guess 1940. So this sign must go back to the 1940s, I guess. A picture of the man to boy, like the logo that's on the sign that I have. 1940, new logo. The next illustration is the top part of a one-page advertising handout. A scanned copy of the entire page was sent by Peter Hannon, who found it among his mother's souvenirs in the 1940 New York World's Fair. The layout probably was based on a 1925 letterhead. The left margin has 5 drawings of herbs used in Dr. Swett's root beer, each with a brief description of its medicinal properties. The modernized logo is a middle-aged man and boy drinking from glasses. The motto, from childhood to old age, is inside the top of the logo. And let's see, moving over to 1942. Well, here's a picture of the bottle of the root beer right here. And going over to 1942, the letter S logo was a trademark for Dr. Swett's root beer. February 26, 1944, registered August 4th, 1942, New York City. And this is the bottle with the S logo on it. In 1945, the Pilgrim Boy logo was the last renewal of trademark for Dr. Swett's root beer. June 6, 1945, filed August 2nd, 1945. And here's what that bottle looks like. It's got the Pilgrim Boy logo on it. That was the last known one of Dr. Swett's root beer. This 10-ounce bottle with red and yellow applied color labeling was manufactured January 3rd, 1946. The oval at the top of the label surrounds a simplified drawing of a boy wearing a pilgrim hat. The label has Dr. Swett's early American root beer, rich in dextrose. The back has Dr. Swett's, the famous root beer recipe of Dr. George Washington Swett, has been improved to make this pure, delicious beverage, rich in dextrose, food, energy, sugar. Another 10-ounce bottle of the same design, manufactured 23rd of March 1946 by Rogers Bottling Company, Vallejo, California, has yellow applied color labeling. All layers on the front label are transparent. The use of only one color was an obvious attempt to reduce costs. Okay, going over to 1949 is a picture of a pretty lady enjoying the root beer. And moving over to 1949, running out of time on this, so I'm going to have to wrap this up. Dr. Swett's Root Beer Company was sold to Oso Grape Company between September 1948 and March 1949. The American Carbonator and Bottler magazine from March 1949 is a full-page ad with drawings of both bottles and a statement. Now, since our recent acquisition of Dr. Swett's Root Beer Company, bottlers of both lines find themselves in an exceptionally strong position. The Dr. Swett's bottle is identical to the 1946-48 bottles, and the Oso Grape bottle also has rich in dextrose on the label. The address of the combined company was Chicago, Illinois. And going to 1950, this ad in American Carbonator and Bottler magazine of March 1951, is the last known attempt to franchise Dr. Swett's root beer. It sets the origin back to 1836 when he was 2 years old and features a photograph that may be him but not verified. And here's this picture right here. It's got the man with the bottles of root beer, three different size bottles. A 10-ounce ball embossed with the year 1953 has a red and yellow applied color labeling. Dr. Swett's early beverage, early American beverage, and that also has the Pilgrim Boy logo. 1957, he said he's seen it advertised for sale but not fully described. A Dr. Swett's early American bottle dated 1957. The most recent example is a 10-ounce bottle embossed with the year 1959. It has red and yellow applied color labeling. Dr. Swett's early American beverage, bottled under authority of Dr. Swett's root beer, Chicago, Illinois. It has a Pilgrim Boy, but the contents may not have been root beer. Trademark status for Dr. Swett's root beer, dead. Last listed owner, Dr. Swett's Root Beer Company, New Jersey, in Chicago. That was from 1990. And that's basically what I was able to find out on the history of Dr. Swett's root beer, and hope you enjoyed this one. And as always, thanks for watching.